Good morning, Rabbi.
Good. Shorshal Pikeach. I'm sorry. We're learning Mishnah Bava Kamma, Perek Daled, Chapter 4, Mishnah Daled, Mishnah 4. Shorshal Pikeach, Shanagach, Shorshal Chevesh. An ox that belonged to a regular, competent person that gored the shar shal chevesh shaytavakatan, that gored the ox that belonged to either a deaf mute, a person who is a shait, a person who is insane, or a minor. Chayev. He is liable to pay. But if the ox belonged to the deaf mute, to the insane person, or to the minor, and it was theirs that gored the shar of a regular competent person, putter, that they are going to be, each one of those are going to be exempt. So now let's just explain here. A cheresh, which we translate as a deaf mute, is someone who can neither hear nor speak. A minor is a boy under 13 years of age, a girl under 12. Torah considers a deaf mute a minor, and a person who is insane to be legally incompetent, and thus not responsible for their actions. So therefore, in a situation where the animal that did the goring belonged to one of these people, they're not responsible, therefore they're going to be exempt. But if you're talking about the shar belonging to the competent person, doesn't make a difference. The fact that they're the cow that got damaged belonged to one who's not competent, not mentally competent. You're responsible for your ox if you're competent, and therefore, no matter whose animal you're going, even if the animal belongs to a person who's not mentally competent, you're going to be obligated. Next, shar shal cheresh shayta v'katan shenagach. You have the ox of these three people: the deaf person, deaf mute, the person's insane, the minor that has gored, and it means that it's gored repeatedly, which means the animal is wild and it's aggressive, but it belongs to people who are incompetent enough to be responsible to take care of it, to watch it. So then, Bezdin Ma'amidin Lenapitropis. Then what happens is that the Bezdin appoints a guardian to watch over the ox for them. Now, as they explain here in the bottom, an apitropos, or I'll call him a manager, is usually appointed to protect the affairs of young orphans or other people who are legally incompetent. The guardian discussed here, though, is appointed not to protect the owner, but to secure his ox and prevent it from doing damage. That's just what the apitropos is for. It's not about taking care of the owner as much as watching over the ox. Now, therefore, once we say Beis Din appoints the apitropos, the manager, to watch over the ox, and then what happens is that the witnesses would testify about them before the court in the presence of the guardian, which means, as we know, a animal that gores starts off as a tam. It's considered not usual for it to gore. If it does it 3 times, and after each time the owner is warned that he's got to watch his ox and he doesn't do so, so the 4th time is Nesek Shalom. The owner of the ox pays full damages. Now in this case, if you're going to warn the owner of the animal, which is either the deaf mute, the insane person, or the minor, it's not going to help because they're not considered mentally competent to take the warning and to bear responsibility. So therefore, who has to be present when the witnesses come to say that the animal has gored? The apitropos, the one who has been put in charge. And if it comes out that after 3 times that it happened with witnesses, and they warn the apitropos, he's got to watch it. He doesn't do so. It still goes out and gores, which means he did not watch it properly. Then the halacha is it becomes a muad, and in that situation, full damages will have to be paid from the property of the owner. Meaning there is a way. Meaning I'm assuming here that, let me just see here. Right. There are ways of being able to take payment from their property. There's ways of doing that. There could be, another apitropos who's taking care of managing their property, managing their estate. But the point is that once the person is appointed to watch the animal, it's possible for the animal to become a muad. Now, nispakeach hacheresh. Now, this is continuing from the case before. The animal was established as a muad. They warned that B'Shabbos 3 times after each time that it gored. It gored a 4th time, so we say it's a muad. Now, by a 4th time, it's a muad. But what happens if nispakeach ha'cherish? The cherish, all of a sudden, somehow or another, becomes able, becomes competent. He becomes able to speak and hear and speak. Or nishtapa ha'shoita. Or the insane person becomes sane. It was temporary insanity. Or v'higdal ha'katan, or the minor became a gadol. Which means now they have come into a state of where they are competent enough to take care of the animal. But the animal was already established as a muad before. Chazer l'tamusay. The animal goes back to its status of being a tam, meaning that which it became a muad under the B'Shabbos doesn't count anymore. It's like you're starting over again. You are starting over again. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosi says, the animal remains in its status. Just because now it went into the domain or control of the actual owners doesn't change its status. Now, why should it change its status? So they explain here, according to Rabbi Meir, when the ox moved from the jurisdiction of the guardian to that of the newly competent owner, he goes back to being a tam. This is because the owner can claim that if he himself had been warned about the ox, he would have guarded it more effectively and prevented it from going 3 times. He therefore cannot be held responsible for having become a muad. Meaning he's going to claim, hey, it's my animal. If I would have been able to have watched it, I would have watched it better than him. So you can't hold me responsible for his lack of guarding the animal. And therefore, the animal will not be considered a muad when it comes, according to a mayor, by the newly competent owner. Rabbi Yosi, who argued and said no, he remains in the same status, holds that the ox did not really move to a new jurisdiction when its owner became competent, because the guardian simply stood in the place of the owner. The ox therefore remains a muad, does not go back to being a tam. You can't claim, hey, I would have watched it better. The apitropis, the manager, was just in place of you, so it didn't change jurisdictions, and therefore, although it doesn't say what Rabbi Yosi does regarding the claim of the owner about hey, I would have guarded it better, but there can only be a claim if you consider it a new jurisdiction. It's a new control. If it's a new control, the new control can say, okay, by me things could have been different. It's not. I can argue that under the new jurisdiction, the status shouldn't continue. However, according to Rabbi Yosi, it's not a new jurisdiction; it's the same status, and therefore it doesn't change. Last case of the Mishnah, Shar ha'itzdadin. That means, literally translated, they translated here as the ox of the stadium. What does that mean? An ox that is trained to fight for the purpose of entertaining spectators in a stadium.
Fighters.
Yeah, they are trained for the purpose. They're trained to fight. They're trained to gore. Mm-hmm. So then, in that case, what happens? Shar ha'itzdadin ein chayav misa. The halacha is, if a shar kills someone. Mm-hmm. That's the halacha. Let me just read it here. Right? Right. There's a pasuk in Shmos, if an ox scores a man or a woman and the victim dies, the ox shall surely be stoned. That's the din. The animal kills a person, you stone the animal. Mm-hmm. So the Mishna is saying, but if let's say the animal that killed the person was a shar ha'itzdadin, it was trained to be aggressive, it was trained to gore, then ein chayav misa, then it will not be put to death. Shenamar, as it says, ki yigach. The Torah says, when the animal, or if the animal will gore, v'lo yishiyagichu, but not that others caused it to gore, because they trained it to do so. So as they say here, the Mishnah speaks of a trained ox that killed a person. So it was trained, it doesn't, when it was trained, I don't know if it was trained to kill people, it was trained to, it was trained to fight, it was trained to be aggressive. Right, which will of course include, will potentially include killing people, but because of the fact that it was made to gore, it was trained to gore, that is excluded from the Torah's law that the animal that gores a person and kills a person is put to death. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So just in this last case,